This is Miss McCulley coming at you with a lesson plan on cultural understanding. The contents and standards of this lesson, we're going to learn about the history of an unfamiliar culture and also see how this is important and interconnected to current contemporary artists. Contemporary artists meaning artists that are creating as of right now, 2017. Students will be engaged in this process by using group discussions, a cultural handout worksheets that will be turned in for grade. These relate to the PA Art Standards 9.1.12b, recognize, know, use, and demonstrate a variety of appropriate art elements and principles to produce, review, and revise original works in the arts. Also, it's going to relate to 9.1.12f, analyze works of art influenced by experiences or historical and cultural events through production, performance, and exhibition. And our PA core standard for this is CC 1.2.11 through 12A. Determine and analyze the relationship between two or more central ideas, including the developmental interaction of ideas. Provide an objective summary of text, which would be the worksheet that will be handed out, and it's also as an example piece as well. We're also going to create a unique piece of art with free line and color relating to an artist found and involved with the Chicago Imagists, which is the basis for my presentation on this lesson plan. Students will be able to express themselves but still follow a rubric that will be handed out and edited to include students with multiple disabilities or who are ELLs and everything else. These are PA State Standards 9.1.12a. Know and use the elements and principles of art form to create works in the arts and humanities. And 9.1.12d. Demonstrate specific styles in combination through the production of a unique work of art. And our last little objective here is going to be students will be able to research a culture and understand and or accept something new that is out of their normal day-to-day culture or life. By including students who are ELLs in this discussion, they'll be able to give some insight into their own culture and use this to advantage while creating the project and participating in class discussions. This is going to be a PA State Standard of 9.2.12a. Explain the historical, cultural, and social context of an individual work in the arts. And we're going to do 9.2.12d. Analyze a work of art form in its historical and cultural perspective. Alright, a theme and topic for this lesson. The essential question in this lesson we'll bring up to my class is, why are different cultures or movements important in the arts? Explaining this to students may come as a slight challenge. However, after explaining a more recent art movement in a culture that is actually native to America, they may understand the art movements in cultures that are directly related. After participating in this lesson, students will be able to make connections with peers and other people in the world by gaining an understanding that even though different types of art come from cultures they may not know everything about, they can use art as a universal language and learn from other cultures through their artists and their movements. Students will be able to connect this lesson to the previously taught lesson in street art, which would have been the lesson behind in this total unit plan. A lot of this lesson has to do with cultural movements in art, but we're also going to add in the technique of visual vocabulary. There's a lot of vocabulary words coming in on this, and we'll get to that a little bit later. The technique aspect of this lesson teaches students about free line and vibrant color, which are two key ingredients not only in street art, which we had discussed in the previous lesson, but also in this lesson now with the Chicago Imagists and the Harry Who movement. This grade level and this class specifically, this lesson is for more of an advanced arts class, so more like 12th grade, 11th grade might be pushing it. There are multiple students who speak Spanish as their primary language in my classroom, and this class is in more of an advanced setting, so students already have an understanding of basic principles of art and are familiar with my classroom environment. Lesson objectives: by learning the South Side of Chicago and the Chicago Imagist movement during the late 1960s, early 1970s, students will be able to learn about a culture in the United States that occurred not too long ago within the student's life. It was only about 50 years ago, which seems like a lot, but it's still pretty recent compared to other art movements that could be discussed. It was also an entire different culture, so the combination should be clear. Creating a unique piece of art that is full of free line, vibrant color, and new techniques will be the end result overall. However, a first research project, a mini research project, will instill the fact research in the fine arts world can differ from other subject areas. Worksheets will be provided, and cultures that are approved by me will be researched. Due dates that are set in stone and non-negotiable will ensure this lesson fits in the duration suggested, which is about 5 days. Students will research their culture, find a movement within said culture, and create a piece combining that culture and the free line and color involved with the culture they were educated on earlier, which would be the Chicago Imagists and the Harry Hu movement. For ELL students specifically, I'll be available if certain areas need clarification, and I'll be open to them researching movement within their own culture. A good example of this is Pablo Picasso was a primarily Spanish-speaking artist who created an entire movement, one of which he created many movements, one of which being called now his Blue Period. Vocabulary for this lesson is the big area for this because we're going to be working with visual vocabulary throughout the entire year, but in this specifically, our vocab words are going to be free line, culture, color, and art movement. With these, my specific learning technique is visual vocabulary. So as an art teacher, I'll be creating posters with not only the words and the definitions, but also visual ideas for them to get a better understanding of the word. And also, I'll be putting in demonstration videos having to do with each of these words so they can gather better understanding through a visual learning strategy, which I think will be very helpful. And these posters that I'm going to create will also be up around the classroom in what I'm going to call a vocab wall. And they'll get changed every lesson plan, but they're going to be there during the duration of the lesson to reiterate certain words that are key to the lesson that we're doing at the moment. Our list of materials, it's going to be a pretty open medium since this is an advanced class. It's going to be acrylic paint, brushes, canvas, Reeves BFK, which is a standard drawing paper, my PowerPoint presentations, which will be taught at the beginning of every single class. There's a video, Watch Harry Hu and the Chicago Imagists online, and an example of step-by-step process on creating the end game piece, the cultural investigation handout worksheet, rubric for the cultural mashup piece, which I would like to hand out just because it's easier for students to have an understanding what they're being graded on if they have the rubric I'm using. This lesson was created based off a project I did one of my art education classes at IUP. A cultural mashup project is an excellent way to educate students on different cultures, not only within their own country, but around the world in general. This lesson is also very culturally inclusive, which will be a project that will make all students, including our ELLs, comfortable within the art classroom. This project is going to teach these students that art is, in a way like math's universal language, that even though if you have a language barrier, you're going to be able to communicate visually. As mentioned before, the students within this class are participating in a higher level of art education. Therefore, they have many techniques and skills already in their arsenal of education previously learned. This will be linked to one project they have done in every art class before the highest level. For every lower level art class will participate in a different cultural project. At this level, I expect students to combine their previously learned knowledge of different cultural projects, also their skill level to create a professional level piece relating to two different cultures. To begin this lesson, I'm going to present to them a base culture and an example. So my own personal example, I took the Harry Hu and the Chicago Imagists, which was a strong movement in Chicago in the 1960s and the early 1970s, and they used a slur of vibrant colors, free line, and a bunch of other things, but I'm going to combine it with my own culture, which is the Irish culture, and we're going to create a big piece on it, and that'll be used as an example for the students to see. This lesson will be created in order to educate students on different cultures and to build a more inclusive classroom including all students no matter their background. Students will interact by having a classroom discussion, which I feel is very important within the art classroom, from brainstorming and creating ideas as a group to go off individually until the end process, which is critique. Students will interact by having classroom discussion, and they're gonna, in this certain case with this lesson, their topics of culture differences and art movements will be discussed. By creating a group mentality within the classroom of this lesson, students will be able to build off of each other as they're provided instructional guides to gain a full understanding of cultures. Misconceptions can be cleared up in a multitude of ways by referring to handouts, asking me questions directly, bouncing ideas off peers they have in the room, or also referring to the visual vocabulary wall for clarification. Feedback will be provided, including grades on their cultural handout worksheets, many interactions between not only students and I, but their peers, to ensure everyone is on the correct path and building towards the main goal, which is their final piece that will be handed in to me. A learning strategy to be included with this is going to be, once again, the visual vocabulary. For the key terms in this project, the posters are going to be up early on in the lesson, and I'll be reiterating for them to refer back to those if they need clarification on one of those words, which are all elements of art that they need to be including within their project. We got a procedure on day 1 and 2. Students will begin this specific lesson with a PowerPoint lecture on the South Side of Chicago, and specifically the Chicago Imagists. Also would like to show the documentary Harry Who and the Chicago Imagists. This overall will take about 2 days. Providing worksheets for students to fill out during the documentary with important information they can use to refer to during the creation process of the next few projects. We're going to move on to day 3. It'll involve the introduction of specific artists that were considered a part of the Harry Who or the Chicago Imagist movement. And by doing this, I'm going to introduce to students researching their own artist and their own art movement. And they're going to choose one of their cultural movements, and they're going to choose an artist within that, because every cultural movement almost always has an art movement with it. And we're going to have a little discussion one-on-one and go from there, and once it's approved they can start working on their sketches. Students will practice and apply what they have learned through creating one final piece involving the information they've gathered on their culture, referring to their cultural investigation handout and the handout given to them on the Chicago Imagists. They're going to create a piece combining their art movement relating to chosen culture with free line and vibrant color. And review and assessment for this. Part of their lesson, part of their cultural movement is going to be including a word that ties into their cultural movement, their art, and their art movement, the artists, the whole thing. And this is also a good way to incorporate visual vocabulary into the art classroom, because it shows students that they can use literacy and forms of words to create art and make a word more clear. At the end of every class, every day, students will be asked to stop their activity 5 minutes early in order to participate in a small quiz type deal. This is going to ensure that they're understanding the vocabulary and the concept of the lesson every day. Or the other option is going to be, because there's not going to be information given to them every day, some days will be work days, and on those days we're going to do a self-assessment on how they feel like they're at in the creating process. Quizzes will not only be verbally spoken, but written clearly on the board up front in front of the classroom to ensure clear understanding of questions. If needed, students will be informed that they can ask me to repeat, slow down, or clarify any questions they might have. After closing this activity is complete, a short rundown of schedule and reminders for the next week will be given as a reminder of due dates, although students will have these on their handouts and their rubrics as well. Students who are ELLs, CLDs, or CLDEs will be asked if they have any questions, concerns, or need assistance through either me or a classroom aide that we have every day during the period. They're going to be provided with a rubric, and once again, the visual vocabulary is going to be a huge part of this lesson in the hopes that students will be able to gather a better understanding of their overall lesson plan. And that's all I got on visual vocabulary in the art classroom and our little cultural handout mashup project. Thank you.